And so it's time to take a look at the first competitive session of the season. Here's Chris Hartley to take you through the key points of qualifying.
Drivers were greeted with a damp Silverstone Grand Prix circuit as they embarked upon the first qualifying session of the year. After going off right at the start of the session, the Ginetta G55 of Ruben Anakazian would have to start the race from the back of the grid. While at the other end of the spectrum, defending champion Callum Lockie got straight down to business, setting an early benchmark time of 2 minutes 20.6 to put the FF Course Ferrari onto provisional pole. The McLaren also going well to post the second fastest time early on. With Lockie having handed over to teammate David Mason, the sister Ferrari of Johnny Mowlem moved on to provisional pole 10 minutes into the 30-minute session, albeit by just 0.2 of a second. Midway through the session, Johnny McGregor was beginning to get close to the pace of the Ferraris in his Mach G Racing Tyrannus, moving up to third place. But with the track slowly drying, it was always likely that the quicker times would come towards the end of the session. Sure enough, a frantic final few minutes saw the HUD Motorsport Audi R8 going fastest. Former British GTC and Lotus Elise champion Adam Wilcox squeezing onto provisional pole position by just 37 thousandths of a second. But there was more drama to come. With Callum Lockie having hopped back into the #1 Ferrari, he went faster still, stealing pole position right at the end of the session. The Audi would line up second and the Mowlem Grimes Ferrari third, but easily the best of the Class 2 cars. On their return to Britcar, Javier Morcillo and Manuel Cintrano put the Neil Garner Motorsport Mosler fourth on the grid, with Johnny McGregor fifth. And following a late tyre change, the Cunningham Porsche went 10 seconds faster on slicks than it had on wets to complete the top 6, in so doing becoming the best qualifiers from Class 3. Ashley Woodman and Keith Hemsworth were the best Class 4 qualifiers, putting their SICL.com Seat in a highly respectable 15th place overall. While the Woodard Racing Organisation Mini, driven by Alex Craven and Adam Busey, punched above its weight to qualify 19th overall and was the fastest Class 5 entry. Here then is confirmation of the top 10 times from a thrilling qualifying session. Mason and Lockie over a second clear of the rest, but with the next 3 on the grid separated by just 1/10 of a second. So on a drying track, tyres clearly played a critical role. By the end of the session, the circuit was too dry for wet tyres, but not really dry enough for slicks, as several teams found to their cost.
You got into false sense of security on half of the track was pretty dry, and then just when you go through Maggotts Beckett's, and then the big right section there was really wet. So you know, you're ready to go in at one speed, and then you realise the car isn't liking it. The back half of the circuit onto the Wellington straight, you're tearing up the wet tyres. So hopefully it's fully wet, or I mean it's not going to dry out. So hopefully it's fully wet for our race, which is later on in the day. It's forecast to be.
However, one man that did benefit from a late switch to slick tyres was Mark Cunningham.
The intermediate conditions on the wets that we had pretty new wets on the car, and it was awful. I mean, the treads were blocking, and it was steering from the rear, even in a straight line. It was just so uncertain that I just radioed through to the pits and said, look, we've just got to, you know, I just want to try the slicks, you know, just to see what the difference it made. And we just hit the sweet spot, we hit the right time, you know, the right circuit, and they came in quite quickly, and I had to do one banzai lap right before the checkered flag, and we managed to pit pole in class. So well chuffed with that, and 6th overall as well. So impressive. I'm really pleased with that, you know, and I hope we can do all right on it.
With no intermediate tyre featuring in the championship, competitors face a straight choice between running either slicks or wets. And with more rain forecast during the race, here's Dunlop's John Pearson with some insight.
we're really at an interesting crossover point for qualifying, because really, if it had just been a little warmer, then the slicks would have worked and come into play very well. But a couple of guys tried it. One guy was quick on them and several weren't. The safe option was to run the wets, but they degrade very quickly in those sorts of conditions. It was just slightly damp. Now we have proper full wet conditions. The wet tyre will operate at maximum capacity for the 2 hours.
It's round 1 of the championship. The cars are on the track and your commentator is Chris Hartley.
So the dawn of a new era for Britcar sees a busy grid headed up by the defending champions, FF Corsa. The rule is whichever of the team's drivers was fastest in qualifying has to start, so it's Callum Lockie that will lead them around. Adam Wilcox starts alongside in the Audi, with Johnny Mowlem and Javier Morcillo on row 2. Further back, 16-year-old Phil Hansen starts the talk with Audi from 11th, while Chris Randall in the Lotus and Jody Fannin in the Aston are two likely candidates for a charge through the order. We're all set then for 2 hours of racing here at Silverstone, on board with Johnny Mowlem from the second row of the grid as the lights go out and the rolling start gets underway. Good start for the Audi. Oh, but off goes Callum Lockie right at the first corner, slams into the wall. The rear wing is dislodged and the defending champion is out. On board with Darren Nelson, who's elected to start from the very back of the grid as he comes charging past Alyn James in the Synchro Motorsport Honda on the run through Copse Corner. A relief to see Callum Lockie getting out of the car unharmed. To go back on board with Alyn James is coming past him from the back of the field. In the Ginetta is Ruben Anacasian. They're leading the race though in the McLaren. A great start for Glyn Geddy. Let's have a look at a replay of this then. Look at the Ferrari to the right of your picture. Gets out of shape under braking on the way into Copse Corner. And then a passenger from then on is Callum Lockie. Very, very rare indeed to see Callum going off the road on this, in particular this circuit, which he knows so well. So on board with Johnny Mowlem in the sister Ferrari on the way down into Abbey Corner. Oh, and then contact and running wide and another contact. That's the Renault driven by Andrew McKenna. The two of them coming together there in these treacherous conditions. Johnny trying to get back on the track, but I think he's too badly damaged and stops in the gravel trap. So two more front runners out of contention here. There is Lee Atkins in the number 38 BMW, who's leading Class 4 at the moment. You can see just how much surface water there is here as he makes his way through Village Corner. On board with the former Radical champion. He's made a good start. He's made up 6 or 7 places from 2/3 of the way down the field. And a good start as well for the Porsche driven by Dave Bennett. The Bespoke Cars racing machine has also gained half a dozen places. We go back on board with Alyn James in the Class 5 Synchro Motorsport Honda, and he is now trying to close the gap to the white BMW, another car which is being driven solo, the Jeff Steele Racing entry driven by Del Shelton. But here at the end of the first lap, through comes our race leader. In second place, a good start for Adam Wilcox in the Hud Motorsport Audi. He's starting to close back up now to the race leader. Back on board with Lee Atkins, and it's another BMW coming past him as we see Tom Howard in the Mike Moss Motorsport machine coming through. That's 17th to 11th for him on the first lap of the race. The former production class champions off to a good start here at Silverstone. Now we go on board with the Lamborghini Huracan of Darren Nelson, who, as I say, opted to start from the back of the grid. He's now closing, and coming past the number 34 Porsche of Darrell Wilson to gain another place. That's 10 places gained on the first lap of the race for Darren. He's up to 16th position now as he comes out of Copse Corner. A very good start as well for the yellow and black Porsche of Mark Cunningham. The SG Racing car leads its class and is 5th place overall, but just behind it, number 19 is Phil Hansen, who's also made up several places at the start of this race. On board with Jakob Mathiasson, as through comes Jody Fannin in the Aston Martin. That's somebody else that's made a good start. Jody has gained 6 places from 16th to 10th on the first lap. That one puts him now up to 9th position. So Geddy leads in the McLaren. In the Audi in second place it's Wilcox, and there is Javier Morcillo in third place, the Spaniard. Good to see that team and Neil Garner Motorsport back in the mix here. It's one of the older cars in the field, the Mosler, but it's a car which has twice taken them to second in the Britcar standings. Now going down the hanger straight further down the order, Alyn James currently running in second place in Class 5 in the Swindon-based Synchro Motorsport Honda, but he's closing up luck on the Mini driven by Adam Busey. That That is the Woodard Racing Organisation car, and the gap is coming right down under braking on the way into the right-hand corner at Stowe. So they accelerate through the clouds of spray. We go back on board with Alyn, somebody else that's come back to Britcar Racing, and he has a lunge down the inside on the way into Val Corner. The door opens up, they're wheel to wheel now into the left-hander, but Adam Busey is hanging on in there around the outside in the Mini. He knows he's got the better line through the second part of the complex and holds on to the class lead, but great racing from the pair of them. Meanwhile, coming through in the lead of the race is Javier Morcillo in the Mosler, so he's got ahead now of the Audi, and both of them have come through first and second. So somewhere the McLaren of Geddy has disappeared out of the race. Up to third place then has come Johnny McGregor in this self-engineered Taranis. He flies through. Fourth is the Audi of Phil Hansen now, and that in fifth place is still Mark Cunningham. Up to sixth position has come Chris Randall from a very long way down the order. Chris Hart has gone from 12th to 7th in the Chevron, and there in the Aston Martin, Jody Fannin has gone from 18th to 6th place. Just behind him, also in the top 10, Jakob Mathiasen in his first start at Silverstone for the Century Motorsport team in his Ginetta, working his way through now towards Beckett's corner. And there's a wonderful looking car. Number 46 is Ian Lawson, another former class champion in Britcar in the BMW Z4. But coming after him, right behind him in fact, is Darren Nelson. On board we go with him now in the Lamborghini Huracan. And Darren, who was a runner-up in GT Cup racing last year in his class, is on a bit of a mission here. And now this is the battle for fifth place overall and for the Class 3 lead between Mark Cunningham in the Porsche and Chris Randall, the very experienced Lotus driver who's gone from 14th to 6th already in this race. Back on board with Darren Nelson, and it looks like he's lining up a move on the BMW Z4 of Ian Lawson. Through he comes. So his next target is going to be to try and find a way past that number 38 BMW that's been driven very well at the moment by Lee Atkins, who's also a front runner in his class here in this 2-hour race. Back on board then with the Lamborghini Huracan as he goes down towards the hard braking zone at Vale, lining up a move. Lee Atkins is a tremendous driver, but there's no way he's going to be able to fend off the awesome power of that wonderful looking Huracan, so he gives the place up, but of course that's not full class position, and Lee knows this. And there is the Tockwith Motorsports Audi, which has already made its way, driven very capably by Phil Hansen, from 11th on the grid up to 4th place.
So a lively start to the race here at Silverstone, but we're going to take a short break now, but we'll be back soon with more of the action from the Dunlop Endurance Championship.